Culture at the Department of Design at the Politecnico of Milan, Politecnico di Milano, and is the Associate Director of the Hermenia Research Group, of course, I guess, yeah, University of Barcelona, where she conducts research on the digital humanities, digital literature, and digital rhetoric. Di Rosario, wow, come on, Signora Di Rosario, stop. Di Rosario won 6 international competitive grants in different countries in Europe, among them a Mary Curie action grant, and worked at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, Geneva. Oh, come on. I thought we were still in Italy. Switzerland and Université Catholique de Louvain, Belgium, and also IT University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and also University of Siena, Italy, University of Barcelona, Spain, and University of, you said it, Jyväskylä, Finland. The title of today's talk is Patchwork Perspectives, Exploring Gender and Postfeminism in the Original Electronic Literature. The session would last about an hour and 15 minutes, with 45 minutes for the Dr. Di Rosario lecture and the remaining time for the Q&A. You ask questions, Dr. Di Rosario answers them. And also, let's begin. And there was something else that I wanted to mention. So also, Dr. Di Rosario contributes to many projects conducted in many universities through her expertise in the research areas of critical theory, comparative literature, transmedia storytelling, and electronic literature and digital rhetoric. Okay, Dr. Di Rosario, I lost my power to talk even. I need to drink some water. I need to wait. Thank you very much for all the things you've done, all the things you've contributed to the world of us, the lovers of literature, the lovers of linguistics, the lovers of, I don't know, electronic literature, electronic, I cannot even talk. The session is yours. Let us begin. And thank you very much for even existing.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, so you can hear me properly, right? You can hear me properly.
Yes, I can hear you properly. If there was any problem, I will let you know.
Exactly. Please do this.
Okay. And also, congratulations on Women's Day.
Yes, congratulations to all women there, and also to the gentlemen. But yesterday was our days, and I think that it's important to celebrate. Later in the discussion section, we might talk about that, but it's important to celebrate in each corner of this world. It was our days, and that's important. We need a day for ourselves, I say, in a little bit egoistically speaking. Anyway, so the title first, Patchwork Perspectives, Explore Gender and Post-Feminist Approaches, maybe plurals as well, in electronic literature or in the origins of electronic literature, maybe. Because first of all, let me thank you, the University Maastricht, you please also, let me thank you all for having me here. I'm very glad and honored that you want to listen to what I have to tell you. So the first time that I scratched this webinar, I thought of talking about something, but then because yesterday was the 8th of March, because we might have the possibility to give another webinar, I decided to somehow narrow it down and to devote all the seminars on women. So you will see that the perspective has a little bit changed, although it stays as a patchwork perspective. Please have in mind this image. As you can easily imagine, this is created by generative AI. But at the end, of this webinar, we will return to this first image. And that's why I'm insisting on let's celebrate the Women's Day, because later we will talk about the prompt. So what we are going to do today. So we will talk about mostly about electronic literature. I want to scratch some important moments in order to trace its history, but also I want to approach it with several methods of analysis and in several ways. And one would be giving a gender perspective when possible, and if it actually fits, because it could not fit, but let's see. So as Catherine Ailes has underlined many times, electronic literature is a recent form of literature. Of course, it does exist. It has existed for several years now, but if compared to literature and classical terms, then it's really recent, okay? So this could look like an easy task to go deep in its origins, but because of the support and because of other ephemeral elements literature, it's not as easy as could seem. For example, many programs have been changed during all this time, this 80th century, 70th century. Supports have been changed, so it's not as easy as one can think. I already used a keyword here that can also give a kind of aesthetics, that it's ephemeral. So we might think, and you probably do the same, you saved all your photos, you save all your important documents on digital format, thinking that, oh, they are saved. Might not be the case. We will see in a while. We tend to think that it's safer to archive things on digital format than in paper, as we have done for millennia, but may have some troubles in doing this. Anyway, what we are going to talk today. First of all, we will try to have an overview on elite and its origins. We will give a definition of elite. You might know that there are several definitions of elite. We'll talk about state of the art, see what's going on there, and fictional hypertext as well. And with this gender and post-feminist perspective in elite, giving also some approaches that can be useful not just for those of us that loves critical studies and literature and poetry and etc., but also in a broader way inside the idea of digital humanities. I might need to say something before starting the lectures that, of course, digital literacy stays in the field of digital humanities, but this is not as been always like this, let's say like this. Already 15 years ago, or yeah, more or less 15 years ago, when I was trying to talk in digital humanities conferences, bringing my expertise in digital literature, they didn't really think that digital literature fits, because at the very beginning in digital humanities was more thinking of how to work on digitalized books or digitalized text in Java. While one of the characteristics of digital literature is to be born digital, right? So let's give it a definition and we go a step back. You might know this definition, and this is quite broad, and we can also have some troubles and criticize it because it's a little bit tautological. But let's read it. According to the Electronic Literature Organization, that I don't know if you know it, if not, I will let you know. It's the worldwide organization that takes care of preservation, distribution, of digital literature in general. Okay, it's already old for our standards and the digital standards, because it was formed in 1999. So 25 years old. So according to the Electronic Literature Organization, digital literature refers to works with important literary aspects that take advantage of the capabilities and context provided by the standalone or network computers. So literary aspects, we can ask, okay, we can wonder which, but this is another story, that take advantage of capabilities and context provided by standalone or network computer, which means that digital born, non-digitalized, like sometimes digital humanities do. They work through technology to analyze quite analog text. No, here the text must be born digital. Okay, this is a huge difference. A step back to focus on two things that I really think are very important. Especially us in Western culture, we tend to be ethnocentric in analyzing anything. And we tend to be ethnocentric even when we don't want to be ethnocentric. So I already apologize for that. But especially in digital literature, sometimes being ethnocentric, it's impossible to avoid, because as we will see in a while tracing this history of digital literature, to our knowledge, all these things are happened in the Western world first. Might be wrong, but there are two huge problems here. That digital literature has been written and created in several languages. And okay, now there are generative AI that they can support us in translating text quite easily. But 2 years ago, for example, that was not the case. So one scholar cannot speak all the languages around the world. So some information might be known read, and even if they exist in some other languages. So the other thing that I want to underline, and while talking and speaking and for the origins, but also for the analysis in general about digital literature, we need to consider a variety of languages, but also a variety of cultural backgrounds, cultural heritages, and contexts in which digital literature has been created. And they are very different from one another. And this has to be taken into consideration. So digital literature cannot be seen as a whole. Okay, it's not the same product if it can be considered a product more than a process. But even if it considered this like in digital culture, more a process, an ongoing process, as I say to my students that follow me, even if digital literature and digital culture in general, more than a process than a product, which also brings some discussion, we cannot consider this as a whole. We have to consider the variety of languages, cultural backgrounds, cultural heritage, and context. Okay, so say that we have the definition, we have this premise in mind. We go to the story, the history of the digital literature. You might know that, I don't know. But the very first piece of digital literature has been considered Christopher Stracy Love Letters. That was created in 1952. In fact, it's a little bit strange because Stracy was not a poet, was not a writer. In fact, he was a pioneer of modern computing. But is now considered like the creator of the very first piece of digital literature. What did Stracy do? Stracy developed using Turing's random number generator. When I'm talking about generators, I'm not talking about computers. Probably you know generators were huge machine that wouldn't have fitted in a normal room. They were big with very short capabilities or memories or other proper skills that we do have in our laptops nowadays. And they use lots of energy, etc. And they were really huge. Anyway, using this randoms number generator, that was this Mark 1 program, he created this combinatory love letters that I have here. So this is as an example, and it's a video. What this actually, it's of course, it's a remediation. I don't know if you are familiar with this term, remediation, that was used in the meaning that we're using now by Walter Grosin. They were talking about remediation and hypermedia. Well, it's not the case to talk about this today, but remediation is a key term for us. So remediation is like to mediate a medium into another one. In this case, this has been done by Philip Booth, first for exhibition in France, and then for an exhibition that I co-curated in Barcelona already in 2016. So yeah, 8 years ago. That it's like the first letter created by Stacy, these love letters, translated. In this case, it's in the Spanish version, but there is also a version in French. Of course, the original text, because of the ephemeral nature, both in this case of the hardware and the software, doesn't work anymore. So this is a remediation or a simulacra of that text, but it does work with the same logic. And you see, love letter, something that you can choose to be a man or a woman and write a very short love letter to your lover. It's a kind of idea of artificial intelligence creating something that's quite in discussion nowadays with the OpenAI and other generative AI. But here, for us that also love literature, there are questions that we might discuss later in the second part of the webinar. And the first one, how can a machine write a love letter? That's what you mean. There'll be some struggling there. Either if you love the person and you try to let that person know that you are in love with him or her, or if you are trying to I don't know, conquer his or her heart. I mean, there should be a struggle in doing this. And in fact, with a simple click, you can generate infinitive love letters. Okay, this is combinatory. It doesn't work with the same logic that now generative artificial intelligence work, but still, it was an attempt to this. And this is the very, to our knowledge, the very, very first piece. But for many years, and to some scholars still now, the electronic literature community has considered stochastic text, that actually should be stochastic text because it was in German, by Theo Lutz as the very first digital literary text, and it was produced in 1959. The German linguistics, see that Strachey was an engineering. Here we have a linguistic. German linguistic that was also a concretist poet, Max Behn, and Theo Lutz, that actually was a PhD student in linguistics, succeeding in producing this electronic free verse using a calculator. What they wanted to do was to produce a literary or a piece of literature from an emotional basis towards a pure rational one. So, as I said before, was the machine that should have been able to create something without the help of the human being, if not just writing the structure behind that. Okay, and this is what was the results. Okay, of this stochastic text that actually did theolutes, but we also had Max Bend name always for two reasons. One was his professor, second, a linguistic professor, second, he was a poet. Okay, so what they did, they create a database of 16 subjects and 60 titles from where? From Kafka's novel, The Castle. So to give it a proper idea of being literature, they use what? A very well-known author, Kafka's, in a very well-known novel, The Castle. And then from there, they generate randomly a sequence of number, pull it up each one of subject or title, and they connected them in this logical constants like gender, conjunction, etc. And this is, they needed to create what? To create syntax. Of course, the same words, the same set of words were used over and over again because that language used permutation. And of course, there could be some weird meaning effects, but considering that was a poem, that could be easier motivated, like, okay, you know that poetry sometimes can be a little bit more or less clear than a novel with the obscure side that the reader has to analyze, a little bit more difficult to understand at the very first reading. And that's why. And this stochastic text was published on a poetry review. So it has all the characteristics to be considered an experimental, a cutting-edge moment in the creation, in the poetry world, in the creation of a poem. So this idea of computer randomized text is something that started Lutz, but it has been interested for many authors in many countries in Europe and in North America. Here you have some examples. So started probably Strachey with Love Letters, but the very first serious, say like this, attempt to create a poem through a machine was done by Strachey, and then in the United Kingdom, and then with I Am That I Am, that was done by Brian Gissens and Jan Somerville. In Italy, with a quite famous at the time, now very famous, though dead, poet Nanni Balestrini, in 1961, tape mark that made this calculating machine, or La Machine à Écrire, Jean Boudot, in 1964. So see, this is, sorry for the bad quality, but this is the permutation that I am, see, that was generated by the machine. What is going on around the world? And now we will have a look on the origins and more recently. What Natalia Fedorova, that is a brilliant Russian scholar on elite, she said that in order to get into the origins of electronic literature in Russian, it's hard because there are untold stories of experimentation of mathematicians. So again, engineering own mathematicians, okay? And again, one of the very first in 1978 that was composed, that was described in an article for the Academy of Science, okay? So, and this again was a program to find minimal means to produce verse, like stochastic text, or like the attempt that Strachey did at the beginning of the 50s. And in Latin America, even though later, highlighted by Claudio Kozak, was the same. The Argentinian Omar Gancedo did more or less the same of what did Strachey with Lord Letter. He did poems codified in IBM cards, processed by a card interpreter. So the same things, a poet or an engineering, like, for example, in Brazil, with Le Tombeau de Mallarmé, recalling Mallarmé, the poet, this Brazilian Hertos Albino de Sousa create a grapheme poem. But again, Hertos Albino de Sousa was an engineer. Okay, so I'm focusing and going fast on all this text. I haven't explained how they really work. What I just want to underline here, and then if you are curious, we can discuss later, is that at the very beginning, more than poets, or some poets, but also some engineers in different countries, or mathematicians in different countries, were really interested in having a machine producing tests, especially poems. Okay. This interest in having a machine producing give us also Brutus. I don't know if you know Brutus. Besides the Latin quote, "Quoque tu Brutus fili me," that Julius Caesar said when he was killed, because betrayed by his own son, Brutus, "Quoque tu Brutus fili me." Brutus was a generative AI, creating plot or novel with certain peculiarities. There have been several attempts of having machine creating novels or plot in any case. But this was constructed just on one thing, betrayal narratives. It was created by Selmer Bridgesworth. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. The second name is easier for me. David Ferrucci. And they work at the Polytechnic, the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute of New York. And it has been the very first to be considered successful in creating complex stories. So that the story weren't too short. That was one of the big attempts that this Brutus did. This Brutus was capable of writing stories on betrayal, just on that, without human help. Let's say like this, in a way that was not just answer a question thing, like, for example, the very famous Eliza psychiatrist that was done in 1964, 66, and I think that it's quite famous. And again, there is a big difference between creating a story using a machine and having, I don't know, a machine playing chess. Because as Bringshaw said, storytelling is the human brain's own sense of elaboration. So one thing is to predict chess move or go move. I don't know if you know Go. It's the beautiful game like chess, but it's harder for a machine to understand it. We'll talk later. Anyway, I just talk about Brutus because he participated in a literary competition in 1999. The machine didn't win, but nobody discovered that it was a machine creating it. So it was really wow. And they were expecting more results, but no. What made this special and why this Brutus worked, why other attempts didn't? Because they built it with target constraints. So target constraints give you more limited set of stories. So you can really decide. Here was like betrayal and that's it. But on the other hand, these tighter constraints, they produce more reliable results. So you don't have lots of variety, but you have a decent, if not nice, results in doing this. Those were the like bicycle principle where it was built. Briefly on the history, on the Western side, of course, other attempts after those on creating electronic tests were also done in Canada and in France. Another engineer, François Lelyonnais, convinced Raymond Queneau to found this Séminaire de littérature expérimentale that didn't really work on machine creating text, but it was like mathematician talking to poets and to writers. And in any case, from there, in 1985, during a very important international exhibition in Paris, the Centre Georges Pompidou, Lyotard, François Lyotard, the very famous François Lyotard scholar, curate this exhibition that was called Les Immatériaux. And there, a group called Alamo showed the birth of a new form of poetry that was actually animated by computer, by this new medium. And then, you know, some big change, because all this were done by a niche group of people that had access to very important and expensive technologies, okay? But in the 90s, there was a proliferation of websites, and it's called cyber poetry. And that was thanks to this man there, Tim Berners-Lee, that made the web available for, let's say, everybody is not even now available for everybody, but much more available than before. And he did this at the CERN in Geneva, where they discover, and Tim Berners-Lee make this usable for free, which made a big change. Of course, there are some changes and some differences, and I'm going fast, otherwise I'll use all the time for myself, no time for discussion. For example, this is important for us now. For example, there is a huge difference from North America and South America because of the background that I talk about at the very beginning of this lecture or this webinar. In North America, they have a very important influence of the post-structural critical theories, so Derrida, etc. And because of that, we're focusing mostly on hypertextual structure and difference of writing and reading in a linear way, or what Barber calls lateral ways. Why in the South America, again, because of their own background on visual and concrete poetry, there are more examples focusing on concretist aesthetics. Okay, so what was more important was the graphical effects, proposing new typography, etc. There were more designers, let's say, like this, that philosopher, if you want. Probably you know some of these words. These are possible approach to read this. Some are missing. We might talk next time. Although some statistics would have been nice, I didn't put. But in these approaches like media-specific analysis, cybertext, and these words, intertextuality and metatextuality. So Ace gave us one of the very first approach or tool to approach digital literature, this media-specific analysis or medium-specific analysis, because she considered this text like technotext, and she said, literary works that strengthen, foreground, and thematize the connections between themselves as a material artifacts and the imaginative realm of verbal semiotic signifiers they instantiate. So she focused on the materiality. One thing is to have been written on paper, another one on the web, another one with video, another one with moving letters, another one with sound. The specificity of the medium you are analyzing. On the other hand, Arstead, we say the of cybertext, he was talking about ergodic literature. If there is an ergodic literature, it must be also an ergodic literature where the effort to traverse the text is trivial, said Arset. So he was saying that this ergodic literature, but for him, that could be also analogical, not just digital. There must be a not trivial effort that you need to do in order to understand the text. And hypertexts fictional hypertexts are a perfect example because it's just like a link to reach another story, but you have to rebuild in your mind. Also, Michael Choice, that wrote Afternoon a Story, had a similar idea, dividing hypertext in exploratory and creative, where you need an effort to do this no trivial effort in order to traverse the text, like in a journey. Other important works are intertextuality, that was done by Julia Kristeva, that is shaping of text meaning by other texts, and Jeanette, and that for us is quite important today, you've seen a while, metatextuality, a form of intertextual discourse in which one text makes critical commentary on another. And then, of course, you have to consider your own encyclopedia. That was I was talking about at the very beginning. Besides considering the variety of languages and cultural backgrounds, etc., that belong to a certain culture, to certain eras, etc., there is also your own, as a physical reader, as a single reader, your own encyclopedia. Your background is very different from mine. So the way we reach and traverse others, besides the ergodic effort that we are doing, there is also our own encyclopedia that tells something, okay? It might be different. So let's go to the fictional hypertext. You probably know that they were popularized around the late 80s and through the mid 90s. So they were predates the World Wide Web. We have hypertext before having the best example of an hypertext, which is the web. The World Wide Web is the perfect example of an hypertext. Don't think just a Wikipedia or other structure like this. It's the web, because the web works with the characteristic of an hypertext. It's non-linear, works with lexies, links, etc. There was this story space STG system that create this software and hypertext, and it's always sad that Michael Choice Afternoon, a story that was published in 1987 by Storyspace in STG system, was the very first hypertext, but it's not true. The very first hypertext, is this one. It's Judy Malloy's Uncle Roger. The fact is that she published in 1986, and without the software. So she wrote all the code in order to create the hypertext. She did everything by herself. This has been neglected for many times, too many years, I would say. It's another case where female voice was silenced or neglected. There are many, for example, the ENIAC women, there are many, there are lots of them. Anyway, but let's go back. So what I also want to say is that this first time was considered this first generation by Catherine Hayes, focusing just on hypertext, and then a second generation that were like, they emphasize this link-led nature and like working with other strategies or other possibilities. But again, this is a quite North American ideas, because we have seen there were already other examples in France or in South America. But of course, in the United States, there were more production. Why? Because United States were richer. So more people had access of these technologies. Of course, now this structure can be replicated by Twine. I don't know if you know the software that allows you easily to to build up your own story, hypertextual story. Anyway, let's go deep to an example of hypertextual fictional hypertextual or hypertext fiction, and this is Charlie Jackson Patchwork Girl, that date 1995. It used to be called as a new standard because somehow create a new standard way to generate or to create fictional hypertext. It consists of 323 lexemes and 462 links. Normally said that it's got its inspiration by two novels. It's a patchwork of these two. The Patchwork Girl that was published in 1913, and the famous Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that was dated in 1818. But there are many others works quoted there from the Cyber Manifesto that was Donna Haraway, that was published like 10 years before. And then many other texts, especially from French philosopher on deconstructionism, like Derrida, etc. And other novels, for example, and this is a classic example that it depends on your own encyclopedia, like Echo would say, The Passion of Unive by Angela Carter, that was published in 1977. One of the pieces that compose this female monster, our Patchwork Girl, came from a woman, from a person, let's say like this, called Tristessa, who is a very important character in this Passion of Unive by Angela Carter, which is a kind of masterpiece in feminist theory and feminist novel. If you haven't read it, you should. But if you don't know and you haven't read it, you don't get it, this link. And this is, again, your own encyclopedia. So the plot, you might know, it's quite easy. What is interesting, it's not the plot, but it's the construction of the. Sorry, a second, because I have to put the battery. Give me a second. Here you go. Oppa. Otherwise, in a while, I will lose connection. Sorry. So it's the construction through links and through images. And this is the first case, because while Afternoon a Story or Victory Garden were mainly done without images, here you have this brain, for example, and then you have pieces of her body reconstructing it. Okay, so there is a beautiful description about this Patchwork Girl. These two images that you see there have been created by generative artificial intelligence. The first one is using DALL-E, the second one is using Midjourney. Giving the generative AI this description: I'm tall and broad-shouldered, enough that many take me for a man. And you have all the description here. Others think me as a transsexual and examine my jaw and ends of outside bone, my throat for the telltale Adam's apple. I have large eyes, born full grown. I have lived in this frame for 175 years. But what I highlight here is I belong nowhere. This is not bizarre for my sex. She's female. That's not like the original Frankenstein. It was a male monster. This is a female monster. This is not bizarre for my sex, however, nor is it uncomfortable for us. to whom belong is also generally meant belonging to. As a woman, you belong to someone, not a place. You don't belong in the city, no, you belong to. Anyway, there are description of the monster, and this description are in first person. So let's give it a look with through the novel structure with who is telling the story. But again, it's a personal, physical description, as we have said, not schematic. You should not say like in a passport. I'm 175 years old, I'm tall. No, it's physical, and it gives also comments on that. And of course, this monster is made of fragments. So in order to reconstruct the story of the monster by these fragments that actually belongs to different women, we reconstruct the story of the monster, the story of the female women to which those parts belonged or used to belong. So already metatextual. And in doing this, we reconstruct the hypertext itself. So there are 3 levels. Like here. So her body is like a hypertext that is fragmented into several parts and must be reconstructed. My left leg belonged to Jane, and blah, blah, blah. My right arm has 2 parts. The upper belonged to Tristessa. This was the character I mentioned before. If you haven't read Angela Carter's masterpiece, you won't get this link. But if you have read it, you go deeper in the analysis and the understanding of this novel. And then the lower part was Eleanor's, etc. Tristessa is quite singular name, while Jane can remember many authors, from Jane Austen to Jane in Jane Austen books to Jane Eyre, and blah, blah, blah. There are many. Tristessa is quite peculiar. But there is a problem here. Because of this structure, because in recomposing this, because you don't see, it's an hypertext, it's not, they were published, I forgot to say that, they were published in CD-ROM. You know, CD-ROM. I don't know if you haven't seen this. In my picture, they were first, in the first slides. Not even in, at the very beginning, floppy disk. Well, my very first Shirley Jackson Patchwork Girl, because I'm quite old, was on floppy. That doesn't work anymore. Then on CD-ROMs, and now they're available online. We send you the program to install on your Mac or on your PC. Though on PC, not always work. Anyway, so on floppy, because of this floppy, to access the text was already difficult. You need to have a computer on your own. To buy it wasn't such an easy. So, but because it was on floppy, it's not like a book. You have no clue of how many pages or lexi has. So the structure is a little bit confusing, and you have to go deeper. And maybe it's random because it's not linear. It's not a hierarchical structure of the writing. That okay, avant-garde already broke with that. Like, for example, Choices, Ulysses, but it's structured still from the beginning to the end. Here it's really dramatic, to use Deleuze Guattari words, you know, it's like, it's not linear, it's chaotic like this, if you want, entre brackets, chaotic. So, does the story, or does hypertext tell stories at all, was wondering Mary-Lou Ryan. We will talk about this maybe later in the discussion, but what is interesting here, I think, is a quote by Shirley Jackson herself. There is no question that hypertext will lose or never acquire those readers for whom a fetus lemon towards the finish line is defining literary experience. Hypertext not built for that. Probably it is because linear text so well built for it that it has become the dominant narrative style in the novel. But there are other reasons to read. So she agreed with that already. It's like we might lose coherence, we might lose linearity and logic developed by this linearity, but there are other reasons to read this. On this narrator, the narrator, already you have two narrators here. One is autodiegetic narrators that's telling their story, and this is the majority of time. And this image of the monster's body as a kind of spoon river, like playing between life and death and giving this narrative, non-narrative style, let's say like this. But you also have Mary Shelley, and she's more homodiegetic narrator. She's a part of the story she tells. But the attention is always on the creature. You also have some dialogue, but in these dialogues, the other is always absent. It's never there. You can read this like a personal journal, an interior monologue, sometimes like Flux of Conscience, in a Woolf's or Virginia Woolf's or Henry James style. James Styles. But what, for example, here, you have this construction and this bill construction in this part. It's called quilt. I put it here, and you can read it because I will send you these slides later. But again, it's this connection between the body master and the body of the text that has to be constructed again in both cases. So this metaphor, that this is important. And this brings us to some theories done, wait, I'll go back there, done by female critics. For example, Ciscus was saying that the female writing has another logic and will ignore the logic that belonged to male to construct a new one. In this sortie, she's trying to find another way because too many feminists, but especially to Ciscus and Yuri Garay and others, women are placed always in the second place of the couple, like inferior or negative. So while male create logic, order, light, even in their style, even in their writing, women create chaos, darkness. We were the witches, etc. So this is the good principle are for male principle, the bad principle are female principle. Let's say like this. So Ciscus and others, they try to create a female writing that has to have certain characteristics. We'll go there in a while, but I want to go back. The first one theorizing this was also Virginia Woolf. When she wrote A Room on One's Own, she was saying a woman has the right and the need to have a space for herself in order to write. And she was saying that for the last 150 years, women writers generally prefer to write novel to the poetic genre. Why? Because according to her, the older forms of literature were already fixed before women writers could significantly shape. Wait, sorry a second, because apparently my battery is really down. Sorry a second. Okay. Wait, I have to change. Sorry for that. Okay. Sorry. the plug didn't work. Sorry. So I had to change the plug. Otherwise, you won't see anything. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. So in the climax of the lecture, anyway, don't worry. I'll repeat this. So the thing is, was Virginia Woolf was saying that the male style has already been shaped with classical forms of literature, like poetry. So in order to have our own space, we tend to write novels, because there we can still form a new form of novels, a new form of language, because it's softer, it's soft enough to be shaped. Back to Ciscus, that was hoping to create a female right style. She said clearly that this kind of writing can be just practiced, I'm quoting her, attempted, improvised. And she said that in Le Rire de la Méduse. If you try to codify and terrorize this, you fail, and because terrorize is always involving patriarchal language and logic that belongs to men. And this is what also Lucy Irigaray said. A woman's duty should be to build up another language, a language that brings different values with another structure. That is actually what Shelley Jackson is trying to do with this hypertextual work, putting together the construction of a body, with this metaphor, like building it. Arm belonged to Tristessa, a knee belonged to Jane, etc. While you reconstruct the hypertext, so all the story putting together, while you reconstruct the metatextuality, so Jeanette's ideas of metatextuality, so the critique of philosopher, scholars in literature, etc., that have been quoted into this text, with not logic, not linear structure, but exactly like Ciscus is said, practiced, attempt, and somehow improvised. Okay? Now no, I want to go here. So just to give it a summing up, because maybe I'm taking too much time. Critical reception of this. Of course, just sense normal reader experience. This is true also for all the hypertextual structure, which is also written by men. But this analysis with a female writing works for them as well. And of course, it's postmodern. Here, for the first time, as I said, there is an important emphasis on images and text that are interrelated. The meta-commentary, as I've underlined many times, on the nature of all hypertext fiction, but it fits better here because it's really full of other text. It's not just some commentaries here and there. No, it's full of other texts, of other quotations, or other novels or critical essays, etc. There is exactly what the French called a mise en abîme. For example, the sewing work that Mary Shelley does on the monsters' bodies, and the reader had to do the same in order to rebuild this hypertext. There were, now less, but there were issues. Limited user access, required a computer, a floppy disk, and relies on a technology that is quickly outmoded. Okay, so briefly, very briefly, but I don't want to talk about this text today. I want just to mention them. There are many other texts that prove this feminist approach of languages, and they are not hypertext at all. An example is this Alison Clifford, The Sweet Old, etc. That is a beautiful remediation of, this is the text, The more you click, the more text will appear. If we have time, I'll talk about this later in the second moment of this webinar if you're interested. Otherwise, it's kind of slide that we can use in another webinar. And this is My Sweet Old Etc. by Burroughs. And it's a remediation to how she reused this text, fragmented it, and worked in another less logic style. Or Maria Mencia, this is one example on working on more recent things like data visualization. But Maria Mencia has been appearing in doing this deconstructive language with bird singings as bird songs, for example. That is a beautiful work by Maria Mencia. I won't talk about this. I want to show you just those I need for the discussion, probably, or I'm already ready for another webinar. Of this beautiful The Boat of Hope, the Winnipeg, again, on fragment of histories by different people escaping the civil war in Spain, thanks to a poet, that Neruda, that rent a boat to allow people to run from Franco. Well, a little bit of state of the art, just to and this is quite recent. This wave, I forgot to say this. The Boat of Hope was done a few years ago, but it's still under construction because you can add your own story. It's a kind of collective memory. You can add your own story because probably your grandfather had this experience, or some relatives in your family. You can add that there. So it's a ongoing process, an ongoing storytelling about this old story. So state of the art. Those are probably the group that you already know. So the ELO, the Electronic Literature Organization, I mentioned, the Entre-Deux, that is based on the University of Montreal. It is the large database on French literature. The LCIP project at University of Bergen, that now is turning to the Digital Culture Center. So it's even bigger than that. Hermeneia studies that Amira mentioned, that it used to be at University of Barcelona. For a few years we stay at Bicocca, but you couldn't know, and probably move back to me in Barcelona if I move back to Barcelona. And then the Little Art, that is Red de Literatura Electrónica Latinoamericana. See, also there, they are like forming a group. There are others, but I'm staying with this. And you probably know about this collection, the ELO one. They are all available online for free. There are 4 collections of Elite. The last one was published just 1 year and a half ago. Sorry, the 4th is not forthcoming. The 4th is already published. I should write the 5th. And then there was the Anthology of European Electronic Literature and the Anthology of Latin American. So you have many. I will send you this. There is links behind the images. We have seen this peculiarity of media-specific analysis, cybertext, and intertextuality that have helped us to go through the Shelley Jackson works. But keep those in mind because we can use them to analyze other texts as well. And I would like to conclude with a few reading practice ideas. The first one was the idea of reader that was done by Lando in his book, Hypertext, that was to blur distinction between writer and reader. When it arised, this didn't work too well. It's not like the prosumer that that was created later by I forgot his name. Gosh, when this the union between consumer and producer versus prosumer. But what I want to highlight here is also this beautiful quote by Italo Calvino in The Castle of Cross and Destiny, which is a book that's an hypertext, there is, so printed book, that's an hypertext, there is no difference between the act of choosing and the act of renouncing. And when you choose a path in a hypertext, you of course renounce of something. And understand what's important to us, information also presented in non-word form. In Shelley Jackson work, you have some images, but of course, in more modern or what is called the third generation of elite, images sometimes so important that words has vanished. But what's the author functional there? So in our tradition, in the Western tradition, authors have a duty. And their intellectual property also give rise to issue of copyrights and plagiarism because they are responsible for what they say. But we have seen that from the very beginning, one of the main goals in electronic literature was to make the machine to create. So we have to rethink this author function. Nowadays, we have example of electronic literature works that have more than an authors. I haven't mentioned that, but probably it's well known. There was a time that there was no need to know about the authors. The content was the important part. Another moment, especially when there was a scientific value where the author was very, very important. But now, starting from the 20th century, the author view, the author approach and the author function must be tackled from different angles, in my opinion. But also, the reader or the spectator and the creation has to be seen in a different way. And with creation, I mean for the artistic one and the literary, so the writing practice. Because the designer or the artist that is creating something is not anymore the only responsible for the work's meaning. There's also on the readers or on the spectator. So some conclusions. You probably know this is The Machine of Lagado by Jonathan Swift and Gulliver's Travels. That already was curious, already would love to have a machine that could create text, a sort of manual generative AI. This is the reproduction by Dali according to the description made by Swift. Anyway, so we have seen that this love for the relationship between machine and creative practice, it's typical in Europe with poetry, but also in Latin America, although they have more a concretist aesthetic. It's in Europe, this new animated poetry, like a form of new poetry, was born in 1985, recognized, while in the United States, we're like focusing more on hypertextual. So when Catherine Hale says that the first generation is focusing on hypertext, she considered just the North America. She forgot about Europe and South America. Maybe the group of people working on that were less, but they were there. Classical ethnocentrical way to approach things. So summing up, in reading digital literature, you have to have a polysemic reading or polysemic approach. You won't have a single standard meaning. I give it like for granted, but of course, if you read Shelley Jackson's Patchwork Girl, the path I choose and the path another person choose very hardly will be the same. So most probably we will read two different texts. The general meaning at the end could be the same. In that case, for other texts can be more complicated. But with Patchwork, at the very end, we might have the same standard text, more or less, also considering our own encyclopedia, as I said. But this single standard meaning that Egos already didn't didn't take for granted in printed book doesn't exist anymore. So you have a multiple really perspective, and not just in theory, but in practice. And you have a multicultural world, of course, that derives from those texts. I will close with this echo idea. So echo pointing out that there is a big difference between a text that can be produced and modified infinitely and texts that are finally produced and that can suggest infinitive interpretation, but the text, it's finitive, so it's done, it's closed, still a finitive text. While a text is infinitive in potential, it's different to interpret it. And I say thank you. You have my email and my address, and I don't know, question, comments, ideas, or whatever. I might be quite boring. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm back.
So there is any question? There is, I'm fine with time. I think so. I took a little bit too much probably, but okay.
No, because I guess fine. We're just here like 23 minutes more than we promised. Ah, we have a hand up in the
Yes.
sky. Zainab Shahzad. What a name. Okay, Zainab, yeah,
Hi,
you can talk.
Professor. Can you please send us the slides for this presentation so we can
Of course,
have
I
it for
will.
later?
I will send you all the slides. I don't know. I might. No, I will send you later. I will send you later. I will send you later all the slides like this you have, and you have all my contacts if you need to write me or don't know, or anything.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, actually, it told everything just like a story. And I guess there is no place for not understanding anything at all. Me, myself, I understood totally like everything. So there's
That's
no
good.
room for, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? I'm very happy about that.
So, yeah. We do.
So
Yeah.
I just give you a draft on what is electronic literature. Probably some of you are familiar with that. I wanted to focus more on women because unfortunately for us, we have been neglected for many years. And showing you that the very first hypertext fiction was created by a woman, but is normally coded a man. It's another example. Even in a new genre that is quite recent and done by very well educated person that should give more space to equality, etc. But that's why it's important to celebrate the Women's Day, because we still need it. And you might remember my first light. I don't know if you remember my first light. My first light.
Yeah, the woman created by AI teaching. Yeah.
Yes, I give Dali very strict instruction. The prompt was very clear. A female professor, a woman professor, teaching in blah, 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 blah. If you have noticed, besides the fact I say a woman, and I didn't say white or Asian or black, I said a woman and immediately was white. But besides that, since stereotypes are with AI, of course, the other thing, if you have, I I could have changed it and I managed to have another picture, but I decided to leave that images because if you have noticed, behind her, there are two men. In any case, there are two men. Because of course, there was a woman teaching, I asked, in a very old-fashioned style, late in the 19th century and blah, 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 blah. And the artificial intelligence immediately put also two men.
Yeah, I see.
This is our stereotypes and bias. But this is good to know because we can fight it. But as women, we need to know that. And that's why it's important to still celebrate in any part of the world the Woman Day. Because
Yeah, it
the
is.
is still big.
Yeah, I guess if you try to use the AI like multiple times, if it's like a random button, or if you try to use it, like give me a picture of a female professor. If you try to use it like one time, two times, three times, and we go on, there's still the photo is like this, and it's not Asian. It's not going to be Asian. It's not going to be Middle Eastern. No, 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 no. This is the stereotype, isn't it?
We do have a class. We do have a class on that in my course of digital culture, how to write the right prompt. But even if you write the right prompt with the right strength, with the right words, sometimes the artificial intelligence is still full of stereotypes that didn't get it. At least not at the first attempt.
Yeah.
There is what is called the prompt engineering. You know how to rightly write the prompt. But still, even if you know that, sometimes it fails.
Yeah. There is no right answer. You're right. Okay, we have a hand in the air again. Our dear chief, Mehzad, yeah?
Okay.
Absolutely. Of course, the- yeah, no, no, yeah, of course, Patchwork Girl was kind of masterpiece, even probably more than Afternoon a Story, and probably because the way Shirley Jackson built it, like full of other text, and as I said, was pre-web era. So this construction of rebuilt a story through the reading path has opened up other ideas than are, because it's like in our video games, you conquer a piece of the Patchwork Girl, you conquer a set of story, you keep on going, and mentally it makes sense. So of course it has inspired a lot. What is interesting, and that Shirley Jackson, after reaching popularity thanks of that hypertext, she started to write books, printed books. That's, to me, it's interesting. Because someone that writes that hypertext reader, of course, open up to other possibilities. One is applied to video games with, bueno, the books like with different parts, the games book with different parts. Read this. What do you want your hero to kill? I don't know. The dragon. Go to page 25. Do you want, or I don't know, do you want your hero to save the dragon? Go to page 62. And of course, in this reading path, you have two different endings. But there is a big difference because you still have a book, you can still control it. And an hypertext, you can control nothing. Even if in Patchwork Girl, she put maps in order to help you, you still got lost. And this is still a easy traverse text in the sense that with the map you can go. But for example, Victory Garden is much more disturbing. We can talk about a real aesthetic of frustration because you don't control the text anymore, so you don't know how to read it, which is sometimes true also on video games, because sometimes when you play video games you are frustrated because either you can't control what your character does, or you are dying too many times. So it's a 20th century aesthetics, the aesthetics of frustration, but it's different from make your own choice books that like with the different ending, because there you are not frustrated because you still control the text. And an hypertext, in a virtual hypertext on a web in a virtual, because these were done in floppy, you control nothing, and that's you're losing coherence, and this gives you frustration. That's two things that you have to consider. Yeah. That's another way to approach them. It's another way to approach them. We need to read, or we need to learn to read in a different way. And one of the things is to be frustrated. That's why Mary-Lou Ryan was asking if hypertext tells story at all. I mean, or it's just an attempt of avant-garde. Some texts like Patchwork Girl, it's nice to read. At the end, you are frustrated, but you have learned many things. Some others, it's really frustration, pure frustration. Consider that, of course, because of the medium itself, so floppy, then CD-ROM, but they didn't have such a big success at that time, because also was a niche group reading and creating them. But after that, because of Twine and because of the possibility of other media, this hypertextual structure actually works. It works perfectly on video games, for example. It's the classical reader that has to learn how to read those texts. The linearity is done. And of course, it's too soon to have, I don't know, another Ulysses written in a hypertextual form, but we are getting there. For example, in Twine, there are many, many beautiful hypertexts, but the thing is, it's a mix between what we normally call literature and what can be considered a video games. So let's say that the border between literature and games is blurring there, you know? So giving categories, it's more difficult. There is always an ornithorhynchus that's somehow skilling out our typology or categories. But remember Baudelaire, he was always writing poems in prose, already killing some standard. So some attempts against the so-called rules in literary studies have always been done. Here there is some more issues that we have to consider. One is the possibility that medium gives us. Twine allows you to add music, to add images, to add text. So this polysemic word is much more evident than in Shirley Jackson Patchwork Girls, but of course that was written in 1995, which in digital environment for digital culture, it's a life ago. You know, it's like another era because things turn fast in digital culture. We need to learn how to read those texts. And it's not true that if you are digital native, it's easier, because still at school, you learn to write and to read according to certain normatives, certain norms, which gives you the text in a standard way. We start to write an introduction, then you have the big part, and then you have the conclusion. And this is still in our mind. So eventually, our brain doesn't think like this unless we write like this. We jump in our mind in a rhizomatic way. But we still write in this with this structure that derives from parchment text. Long time ago. That's good. That's good. It's not that the Western do everything well. No.
Hi, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm Yegane. And wanted, I'm not sure if my question is really relevant to the topic, but like, I think still in some genres, such as like fantasy or adventure, we still lack in creating female characters. Usually they are really hypersexualized, or they are side characters, or they have really masculine characteristics. And I wanted to ask how digital literature and how electronic literature and the works of women can help us create more relatable characters. I mean, even if we have female characters, most readers, or for example, in like media like animation or video games, most um, the consumers aren't relating to the character because I think the character is not real and we don't feel connected to it. I wanted to ask how we can like get help from the works of other women in other genres, especially in digital forms of literature, to create more relatable and more impactful female characters.
Your question is actually very relevant. First of all, we women, we need to work together, which is not always the case. I don't know in East culture, but in Western culture, we do have this Disney's production that for century, no, but for many years, when 1 century more or less, yes, one wait, that has created some kind of course, Disney's remediate old story. You know, it's not that Disney production like Cinderella or blah 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 or Snow White have been written by male authors, and there is always a fight to get the Prince Charming. So sometimes we have been taught since very small age to be beautiful, silent, in order to reach the Prince Charming, you know. So we tend not to cooperate, but to fight against one another. And this is cultural background, and unfortunately, it's true all over the world. So the first thing to do is us trying to support one another. It's interesting to know that in many countries, before women getting the right to vote, all the other class or all the other race got it, because even in Western Europe, in Western world, many citizens didn't have the right to vote. For example, in Italy, women got the right to vote in 1946. In Switzerland, in 1970 something. Okay, so we tend to forget that. So the first thing is in the United States, black male got the right to vote before women. So we have to remember that we tend not to collaborate, which is bad. We need to collaborate. Then on your question, there are not enough women producing elite or writing for fantasies, literature, or working for video games industry, etc. This is due to a classical cultural stereotype that women are better in certain areas, which is not true at all. But the society has built like this. In Europe, nowadays, it's famous the STEM project, trying to ask women to do some faculties that are more scientific, of course, because there are big minority number of women there. But remember one thing, when I mentioned the ENIAC women, I don't know if you know those women, I write it here, ENIAC women. You can have a look of them. ENIAC women, the ENIAC project was done during the Second World War by the US government. At that time, what was important when there was still calculator and non-computer, what was important was the hardware. Look at the word hardware, software, hardware, that was the important part. So there were, the majority of them were men, almost all the men, working on the hardware. On the software, there were many women. ENIAC women were the very first women trying to programming a language without having it. So they invented it, okay? Nobody knows about them. They neglected, when they launched the program, they neglected to study. No, well done by the US Army only. So we have been silenced since ever, okay? And this problem that at the beginning of the web era of the internet, the web are not the same things, but at the beginning of the web, there was at least optimistic perspective, say eventually with the web, this gender gap will be gone, etc. It's not true. It's a very nice place where haters can do the same. And there is a beautiful, I can talk this and then the next webinar if you want. There is a beautiful study by Anita Sarkeesian on video games to see how female characters have been erased, because in video games, especially in video games, but this is true also on fantasy literature, and then I will say how digital literature is trying to solve the problem, if it can. There are tropes and stereotypes figures. So the first one is the mademoiselle in distress. What's the mademoiselle in distress? It's true in each culture. A poor female, beautiful woman that needs to be rescued by a vigorous warrior man. Each culture can give you many examples of this, from paintings to literature to anything. And so on video games, you have the classical poor woman that need to be rescued by a man. Then you have other figures like the woman is skilled and the man has to rescue the daughter, etc. And there is the final climax in which the woman lost her head and she commits suicide in order to save the man. Yeah, because of course women are hysterical. This is another standard for any culture. So to answer your question, first of all, we need to reach those places where we can make the difference. So We need to study, and we need also to work for industry, enterprise, where we can make a difference at university, but in many levels. Working all together. How digital literature can solve this problem? It's hard, because when in a field that is so fresh and new, the very first woman creating a hypertext was silenced, because it's always said that it's Michael Cho's afternoon of story. You see, it's hard to work. But of course, the moment a very important number of women are reaching this position, we can change this standardized idea that in order to be strong, we need to have a male body or white male body. Look at the description that Shirley Jackson gave. She has a male body. So to be strong, she has a male body. So this is a stereotype that we need to kill. But be careful, because sometimes we women build this. The moment, and it's tricky, because this was already said, Simone de Beauvoir, how can be feminine, so loving, put pink dress, for example, and be considered like a man. So many times women, in order to get listened to men, especially in conferences and blah, 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 they dress like men, like with a jacket, with a proper suit, no, in order to be believable, this is something that you have to work in for generations. It's not that in a while will happen. But I think we are taking step by step. And in fact, in the fact that in digital literature, in a few years, many women have started to work in the field. This is somehow blocking the gap, or at least reducing, I think. But of course, it depends on us as well. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. When you mentioned like sometimes we women do this, for example, I'm personally really interested in like Eastern literature and culture. And for example, there's this really famous manga by a woman named Koyoharu Gotuge. And manga is a really old and like famous form of Japanese literature. And even when the writer is a woman, the female characters are really like sometimes I feel like the women are there to just help the men achieve their goals. And like for example, it had this really powerful demon woman. She was really powerful, but at the end of the day, she was so emotionally dependent on her brother that she couldn't do her task alone, and she was like screaming like, brother help me, brother save me. And while at the same time she was more stronger, she was stronger than her brother. And sometimes it's really interesting for me, because I think women sometimes do this because they want to be relevant, because they want their work to be successful. So uh, they have to create female characters to be
Be
more
fragile
appeal
and
to
a little
men.
bit hysterical. This is just Georgia part. You are totally right. But the good things is that um, um, have you seen The Hobbit by Tolkien? I don't know if you are familiar with this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Haha. There is a character, the female character, Tauriel, the elf. She didn't exist in the book, but they needed to add in the movie to attract female audience, to attract the girls. Eventually, step by step, very slowly, we are reaching there. The producer understood that the movie was nice, but many teenagers or many little girls won't be identified with any of the characters there. So they had a warrior, a female warrior, in order to attract that audience. It doesn't exist in the original text. So they did it on purpose for having a bigger audience, a bigger target, which is good, because eventually we also have, it's a remediation in Bolter and Grusing with a different interplay. Interplay is what are the differences between the text in the origins and the remediation in the text that has been produced by the original one. So in the movie, there is a character that doesn't exist. And the boss probably wouldn't have never existed if Tolkien could have said something, but he couldn't. So it does exist. And this is an example of how slowly, little by little, we can reach there. And of course, when I say we first have to work on that, it was I mean, maybe change your target. Instead of reaching just male, try to reach female audience. It's there. There are many female and there are many women that love fantasy, love video games, and they don't feel identified in anything because all their characters are built on male figure. I remember myself when I was a small kid reading lots of books and making up a new character because I couldn't identify myself on any of them. So I need another one because I want to play like a female character, but all the female were so fragile, so hysterical, I couldn't recognize. I was like, I'm not like this, I don't want to play that. So I use my imagination and I make up a new character. I've always done it. I used to be in love with pirates, and there were a few female pirates, but too few. So I need to add characters in order to have my own and to play with it. So we can, but the first one, it has to come from us. We can't wait for someone else to allowing us to do that. We have to be a little bit stronger. I think we will reach that, but not soon, unfortunately.
Thank you. Truly, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, we can still work on digital literature. We can give it the next time maybe a more rhetorical approach with new media figures and Excel, not just to stay on female perspective, but we can also have another one on just female's perspective, etc. Like a conclusive one, but this will be just in digital culture and digital humanities. That will be right. But I don't know. We will talk about that. And later today, I will send you the slides like this. You can have them and go through them. Okay. Thank you for the invitation and have a wonderful afternoon, evening for you already. La presentazione è stata molto informativa e molto interessante. Grazie mille. Thank you very much. Actually, I asked Anne to say thank you in Persian because one of my best friends is from Iran. But he told me, you pronounce it very badly, forget about it. So I was like, okay, if you say so, I won't say that. Yeah, we know each other for years now. It's more than 20 years. So he told me that. I thought,